Hello class, this is lesson 3-8 about how to multiply and divide rational numbers, meaning they could be fractions or they could be decimals. So if you recall, if you have two numbers that have the same sign and you multiply them or you divide them, you get a positive answer. So for instance, if they're both positive or both negative and you're multiplying them or you're dividing them, the final answer is still going to be positive. But if they have different signs to begin with, your final answer is going to be negative. So for instance, if you're multiplying a positive times a negative, you're going to get a negative answer, or vice versa. Or same with division. A positive divided by a negative is still a negative, and same the other way around. So hopefully you remember that. A couple other things that I wanted to note about fractions is that if you have an integer, you can write it as a fraction over 1. Or there's something else that is called a mixed number. This is where you have an integer with a fraction. Okay, so that's called a mixed number, 5 3/4. Or you can have a fraction where the numerator is larger than the denominator, and this is just called an improper fraction. So I just wanted to remind you of these before we move on. Now, to multiply two fractions, it's pretty easy. You can just multiply straight across. Okay, so for instance, I have 3 times 1 on top, which is 3. And on the bottom, 5 times 4 is 20. And because it's a negative times a negative, my final answer is going to be positive because they're the same sign. Pretty basic. So let's do a couple more. How about 5/12 times negative 12 over 5? So multiplying straight across, 5 times 12 is 60. And on the bottom, 12 times 5 is also 60. And because it's positive times a negative, it's going to be negative. And this simplifies to negative 1. Now, another way that you could have solved this to make it even faster was what we call cross-canceling. So anything that's on top and on bottom that is the same, you can just cross them out immediately. Because 12 divided by 12 is 1, and 5 divided by 5 is 1. And since there's a negative, my final answer is going to be negative 1. All right? Let's go ahead and move on to another example. So this time we're going to multiply 1/8 by 6 over 7. And even though I don't have the same number on top and bottom, I'm going to reduce diagonally by dividing them both by 2. And so now I have 3 over 28 when I multiply. And I don't need to simplify my final answer. It's already simplified. Let's do one more example. How about negative 2/3 times 9 over 2? I can see that the 2's I can cross cancel. They both become 1's. And the 3 and the 9 I can reduce. So my final answer is going to be negative 3 because I have one negative sign. So now what we have is an integer times a fraction. And so a good thing to just do at the very beginning is to turn that integer into a fraction by making the denominator 1. And then I can multiply straight across. And then I can simplify, and that becomes the number 4. Another way that you could have done it was by reducing, going diagonally, and then 2 times 2 is also 4. So it's kind of up to you, but I like to look for the shortcuts whenever I can. Here's another example, negative 2 times 3 and 1/5. So this time it's an integer times a mixed number. And this is where it's very important. You have to do this. You need to rewrite the mixed number as an improper fraction at the very beginning. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that. If you forgot how to rewrite this, you multiply the 3 times the denominator and then you add the numerator. So that's 15 plus 1 is 16 over 5, the old denominator. And now I can multiply straight across. Negative 2 times 16 is negative 32 over 5. But this now leaves me with an improper fraction. So one more time, let's rewrite it so that it can go back as a mixed number. And we do this by dividing. So 5 goes into 32 6 times. That leaves me with 30, and I have a remainder of 2. And now I bring that up, and I have 2/5 as my remainder. So it's going to be negative 6 2/5 because it should have been a negative answer to begin with. So let's go ahead and move on now to the term called a reciprocal. A reciprocal is simply just a number that's related to another number so that their product equals 1. Okay, so it changes for every single problem, but it's like a magic number that when you multiply the two numbers, they equal 1. So let me just show you a couple examples and then hopefully you will understand this. So if I have 3/4, the reciprocal is 4/3 because 3/4 times 4/3, when I cross all those out, it equals the number 1. So basically we're flipping it upside down. So for instance, negative 5/12, the reciprocal would be negative 12/5 because again, as I can show you, when you multiply these together, it equals positive 1. The reciprocal of a whole number or an integer is just reversing it 1 over that number. So 6 times 1/6 is still the number 1. The reason why I'm talking about reciprocals is because if you're going to divide fractions, you are really going to multiply by the reciprocal of the second number. Okay, so you're always going to do this with division in terms of dividing two fractions. So for instance, if I have, let's say 4/5, and I'm going to divide it by 9/10, that really is the same as 4/5 times the reciprocal, 10 over 9. Okay, and then I can do some cross canceling, make it easier, and my final answer then is going to be 8/9. Okay, so just in that one step, you turn it from a division problem to a multiplication problem. So let's do that here. I'm going to rewrite 7/15 times the reciprocal, 5 over 4. I can cross cancel, and I'm left with 7 over 12. Piece of cake. Let's do a couple more. The next one is going to be 5 1/3 divided by -7. So just like you were probably thinking, we need to rewrite this mixed number as an improper fraction. You need to do that first. So that becomes 16 over 3 divided by, and I'm going to write it as -7 over 1 because now I'm going to change that to its reciprocal. So 16 over 3 times -1 over 7. And now, like before, I can multiply straight across and I get -16 over 21 as my final answer. All right, let's do a couple more and then we'll be done. So 5/11 divided by 1/2. They're both positives, so this is a little easier. I'm going to circle this so that I know that that's what I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. And so straight across, that becomes 10 over 11. And I'm done. And let's do one more example. Let's make it a little bit harder. So 2 3/8 divided by just the number 2. So let's rewrite first. So that becomes 19 over 8 divided by 2 over 1. And I'm going to change that now to be multiplying by its reciprocal. And that becomes 19 over 16. But I cannot have an improper fraction. So if I rewrite it, I find that it is going to be 1 3/16. And there you go. So to close, let's end with a word problem. Spencer walks his dog 3/8 of a mile each day. What is the total distance he walks his dog in 5 days? So 1 day is 3/8, so 5 times 3/8 is going to give me the total distance. So again, that's really 5 over 1 times 3 over 8, which leaves me with 15 over 8. And I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this by dividing, and I'm left with a remainder of 7. So in total, in 5 days, he walks 1 7/8 miles. So hopefully this is a refresher for you guys on multiplying and dividing, but let me know if you have any questions when you come into class.